Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. With only 3 weeks left until the election, we're going to focus only on the most important and the tightest races. On Thursday, the Democratic-Republican leaders of the 105th Congress finally completed work on the appropriation bills to run the government this coming year. Although the Judiciary Committee and possibly the whole House will have to reconvene after the election for the impeachment hearings and possibly a vote, it is time to shift our attention to the 106th Congress. The 106th Congress will face the challenge of stabilizing a shaky world economy, dealing with a host of domestic issues, and probably making a final decision on the impeachment question. In northern Kentucky, longtime Republican Representative Jim Bunning is running for the U.S. Senate this year against Scotty Basler. As a result, the people of the 4th Congressional District will have a new representative after November the 4th. The 4th District includes 22 counties in northern Kentucky. It stretches from rural Appalachian areas in the east to the suburbs of Louisville in the west, and the booming Kenton, Boone, and Campbell counties at the pivot point. This morning, I will be joined by both candidates. The Democratic candidate is Ken Lucas. Mr. Lucas has served as the Florence City Councilman, as the Boone County Commissioner, and for the last 6.5 years, the Judge Executive of Boone County. As always, I tried to convince the candidates to appear together, but Mr. Lucas requested individual interviews. Ken, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you, Dan.
If you're elected, what will be, on the level of principle, on the level that really makes a difference, how will you be distinguished from your opponent if he's elected, Jay Williams? What is it that sets you apart?
Well, I think there's far too much hostility in Congress and lack of civility, and that's certainly a pet peeve of mine. You know, I would go up there to represent the people of the district first, not a party. I think Congress is far too partisan. It has grown worse and worse over the years, and I feel very strongly that I want to go up there and represent the people of the district first, not partisan politics.
And how would that, concretely, what would be an example of where representing the people of the 4th Congressional District rather than party ideologies, how would that be expressed in, either legislation or whatever?
Well, first of all, I was born and reared in this 4th Congressional District. I grew up on a tobacco farm out in Grant County. I worked my way through the University of Kentucky, and then I went from there. I was a pilot in the Air Force. Other than the time I spent in Lexington in college, and when I was a pilot in the Air Force, I was all over the world, I've spent my entire life in northern Kentucky in this 4th Congressional District. I think I know and understand the needs and the wants and the concerns of the people very, very well. And my prime consideration are the needs and issues that the people feel important, not partisan politics.
Okay, but what would be a concrete area? What would be something that would be on your priority list, high on your priority list, that you think is coming from the people?
Okay, I really feel like that we've done a great job in northern Kentucky on economic development. We've been looked at as one of the premier economic development organizations in the country. We put that together at the Chamber of Commerce back about 12 years ago when I was the chair-elect, and that has been very, very good for our community. And I feel like that economic development is very, very important, particularly in the eastern end of this congressional district where there's unemployment and underemployment. And I'd like to take the skills and the knowledge that we have had here and take that to the people of eastern Kentucky.
What would be the role of where you want to be elected to the federal government? What would be the role of the federal government in that?
Well, I see that as the sitting congressman, I would use that office as a bully pulpit to show the people what we did and how we did it and how we were successful, and to show them if they work together and put their best foot forward, take an inventory of their strengths and their weaknesses, and scientifically market their area, I think that we can make some great strides there.
Okay. Let's talk about a couple of issues that certainly will come up because they come up in every Congress. One of them is the whole area of education.
Yes.
And education funding.
Right.
On Thursday of last week, the Congress and the White House finally came to an agreement on the appropriations bills. And one of the key differences was about federal funding for education to
Right.
increase the number of teachers, and the question of buildings was a separate
Right.
question. What do you think the proper role of the federal government is in education
All right.
issues?
I feel that the less involvement they have and the less mandates they have and unfunded mandates, the better. I would love to see any federal monies come to the local district and let them use their discretion on how to fund them. For instance, there could be areas where they talk about having a more favorable student-teacher ratio, and I think that's wonderful. But it could be that they need technology, they need computers, they need infrastructure, they need buildings, because, you know, with additional teachers, you need additional class space. And I think each district is unique, and they should be making those decisions at that level. So I don't like to see the federal mandates come down on high. I'd like to see the money come down. Certainly the districts need to be accountable, but they decide how to spend the money at the local level.
And of course, that is an issue because there's a lot of problems with education in this country.
Absolutely.
And it's primarily in the hands of local boards and local administrations.
Correct.
Do you really trust that the federal government should just give these, you know, in effect, block grants without many strings? Do you trust the local administrations to spend it wisely?
I think that there certainly needs to be accountability. I don't think you give them money and not ask for accountability, but the local people know their needs best. They really do. And I feel like that, you know, if the money can better be spent on technology or infrastructure or school safety, then that's where the money should be spent. I just don't feel like that we should have these mandates coming down from on high.
Another question, another area, the whole question of health care. This is an area that is a concern of people across the country.
Right.
Kentucky certainly has taken some steps in that area.
Right.
What would be your view about, again, the federal role in the next few years in the area of health care and managed care reform?
Okay. About 85% or 164 million people are under some kind of managed care program. And, you know, the problem that we have here is that we're putting profits ahead of patients. And I feel very strongly in that what we need to do in a patient bill of rights, I have my own thoughts as to how we should do that. But I feel like one of the very most important things is when a person is critically ill, they want to be able to choose their doctor. Their doctor. That is so important to someone who is critically ill, particularly if they've had a long-term relationship with a doctor. So I feel very strongly about that. I feel that there needs to be a swift appeals process whereby people, if they don't agree with the decision, that they can have some resolve there. I feel like there just needs to be less red tape. You know, people have to get pre-authorization to go into an emergency room. I think that's crazy. I think women who want to go to an OBGYN shouldn't have to go through a family doctor to do that when they routinely go to an OBGYN. There are just many things that we could do, I think, at that level to improve the system.
Do you think coming from Kentucky, where Kentucky has been, you know, more aggressive about trying to deal with managed care, would give you an advantage?
Well, not necessarily. No, I don't think so. I think the main thing is that we just need to keep the people ahead of profits, and I think we need to use some common sense as to what makes sense for people.
Okay, moving on again. The whole issue of budget cuts, tax relief versus Social Security.
Right.
You know, big issue out there with unfunded Social Security that's hanging out there.
Right.
What do you think the federal government should do? One, on just reform of Social Security, and two, using any surpluses that exist.
First of all, I think Social Security is a sacred trust with our seniors and the generations to come. I feel very strongly that we need to get that secure. I feel very strongly that we should take the Social Security Trust Fund off budget, offline, so they can't double count the money, and take the surpluses of money that are coming in now over what is being spent. That shouldn't be counted for other deficiencies in other part of the federal government. So I think we need to take it offline and make it a sacred trust. The other thing, I don't think, you know, I've been in the financial planning business for 31, going on 32 years. I know and understand the time value of money. I understand stocks and bonds and all those things. But we cannot afford any risky schemes with our Social Security. It's social insurance. There are other facets to this.
Would you be open to changing any of the things that are out there now? When you know, changing when somebody can start drawing Social Security, change the amount they're paying?
Well, obviously, what everybody would like would be to draw it sooner rather than later, but you know the pressure's on to make it later.
That's
to save
right.
The
Would
fund.
you? Would you?
Well, obviously, I'd like to hold the line because when people work and they get to be 65, you know, it'd be wonderful if they could. Obviously, I think anyone would like to hold the line on that, but I just don't think we can afford any risky schemes when you see the stock market bouncing up and down 300, 400 points a day, where you know 3 to 5% of the value of your fund can move in one day's time is too risky for a fundamental thing like Social Security.
We're going to run out of time. I want to get two more issues.
Yes.
One, the 106 will be sitting when and have to deal with some foreign policy issues. How do you feel about American troops working as peacekeepers in places like Bosnia and Kosovo?
All right. You know, you talk about Kosovo and Bosnia. We have a family in our church that has come from Bosnia, and to hear the atrocities that are going on there firsthand, you know, I think we're a world power, and I think that we need, as the #1 world power, I think there are situations where we need to be involved. I feel like we're saving a lot of human lives in Bosnia, and I feel that we should be there. And I think it's on a case-by-case basis as to whether we should be there, but I very much support what we're doing in Bosnia. And I don't want our troops under UN command. I want them under our command, by the way.
Okay. And what about in the whole question? Well, they're talking in my ear, and I know I'm going to run out of time. Let me get to one last question. Another issue the 106th is going to have to face is the renewal or reform of the special prosecutor law.
Yes.
Where do you stand on that?
Well, you know, that's kind of interesting. It seems like in some ways it gets kind of out of hand. You know, we certainly need to bring people to justice, and it seems like through the years, traditionally, we've been able to deal with the problems we've had in this country, and it just seems like it gets to be a media circus, and it seems like that maybe they delve into areas that are far-reaching more than what needs to be gotten into.
Okay, so sounds like you would restrict it somewhat.
Yes, okay. I think it should be restricted.
Well, we're running out of time. Thank
okay.
you, and we'll watch November 4th and see what happens.
Thank you, Dan.
Stay tuned. After the break, I will be joined by the Republican candidate, Jay Williams. Welcome back. I am now joined by the Republican candidate for the 4th Congressional District in Kentucky, Jay Williams. Mr. Williams has served both in the Kentucky House of Representatives and the Kentucky Senate. He is a computer consultant by background. Jay, welcome to Newsmakers.
Great being here, Dan.
You know, just to start out here, what is it that would distinguish you on the level of principle if you were elected to the U.S. House of Representatives? What is it that would distinguish you from your opponent, Ken Lucas?
And one of the key things is that I say I'm against taxes. I've signed a no new taxes pledge, and I've got the best anti-tax voting record in the Kentucky Senate, and that's per Kentucky Taxpayers United's ratings over the last 6 years. So I think that I not just say I'm against taxes, but I've got a record to prove it. My opponent, on the other hand, I mean, he recently has signed the no new taxes pledge and says he's against taxes, but he's got a 4-decade record of raising taxes really several dozen times.
Now, on Thursday of last week, the House finally came to a budget decision which did not include the Republican tax cut. What do you think about that? How did you stand on that bill? And what taxes would you want to cut when the 106th actually assembles?
Well, you know, they said you couldn't balance the budget and cut taxes, and we did. And I think you can save Social Security and cut taxes, and that we should do both. Because it's the tax cuts that put money into the average American's pocket and the average American business that has generated the surplus, the increase in revenue. So I would cut taxes that, number one, the marriage penalty, the inheritance tax, the death tax, that should be cut, the capital gain should be reduced. Those are the places that are very obviously not fair, and those taxes need to be reduced. Now, there's a whole host of other tax cuts that were in that proposal.
Now, on the essential question, you say you want to save Social Security. What would be your view about sort of the essential ways that that has to be done? We're both baby boomers. I'm more towards the leading edge of it, I suspect. What is it that you think is going to have to be done to save Social Security?
Well, to save, there's three principles, first of all, you have to follow. Number one is you can't change any benefits. The benefits that were promised when people enter the system.
you can't change benefits for people who are now there or for people like us who haven't started to draw on it.
The benefits that when you entered the system, okay, that you were promised when you entered the system ought to be at least those benefits you get when you retire. Okay, so we're not going to change for retirees. We're not going to change for people who've entered the system.
Including raising the age of when you could start to draw it, for example? You wouldn't change that?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Also, you cannot have any more tax increases. We've had 20 tax increases over the history, and that's just going to go on forever if we don't stop it. And we've got to save it not just for this generation, but the next generation as well. So those are the three principles that I would employ in doing that.
Okay. In this last week, in this whole budget discussion, there was a lot of discussion about education, and I'm not so much interested in analyzing what happened in the 105th. I'm interested in what you will do with the 106th. But one of the arguments there between the Democrats and Republicans was to boost the number of teachers, 100,000, and to give money to rebuild school buildings or add school buildings. What do you think of that model and for educational spending, et cetera? What's the role of the federal government in local education?
Well, I'm a very strong proponent of local control, so I don't want to do anything from the federal level that would usurp the local control. And the local communities are the ones that are uniquely qualified to know what's going to work best in their community. And right now, with the federal money going to education, sometimes the strings that are attached to those grants are actually more cumbersome than the money they get, and they have to hire somebody to fill out the grants, they have to follow all the procedures. It creates a big bureaucracy. As a matter of fact, something like only 60% of the federal dollars allocated to education actually ever reach the classroom. There's an initiative of dollars to the classroom that would take 90 to 95% of that money and make sure it gets to the classroom.
But what about, there's a lot of questions too. You've raised the question of the federal bureaucracy. So a lot of questions about the efficiency and effectiveness of local school boards and school administration to do their job. Does block granting or sort of the Republican approach without the strings, as you want to put it, is that really a responsible thing to do? Rather than saying, if we give you this money, we expect this in return.
Right now, you've got a myriad of different grant procedures and policies, and what it causes is a real growth, forces a growth in administration at the local level instead of teachers. I mean, they've got people that are dedicated to just paperwork instead of dedicating to teaching kids in the classroom. That's what we ought to be doing. And we've got all sorts of strings that require, for instance, some disruptive students that have to stay in the classroom when they could be better handled perhaps in an alternative school or with a lower teacher to student ratio. But the federal strings actually inhibit learning in the classroom.
Where do you stand on the issue of the federal government establishing some sort of standard, some sort of goals for education?
I believe that curriculum decisions is a local community decision. Historically, education has been local. We had the Kentucky Education Reform Act in Kentucky. One of the cornerstones of that was local control, that the local school, not even just the district, but the local school and the teacher in the classroom had the ability to set their curriculum. And I think that is the direction we should go, to where the local communities, the local teachers, the local parents set the curriculum, set the guidelines for that school, and not somebody in Washington, D.C.
Okay, we could explore this education thing some more, but I know time, so I want to keep moving.
Okay.
In terms of another area that I know is going to be coming up in the 106, is the whole area of healthcare reform. This is an issue across the country. Kentucky has some special insight into this. What will you take, what have you learned about reform of health care that you will take to Washington because you're from Kentucky if you're elected?
Well, we know what doesn't work, okay?
And how does that apply to the federal government?
And we implemented a system that essentially resulted in something close to a single-payer system. That doesn't work. We implemented a mechanism whereby the state government tried to take over some of the processing of health insurance, and we've had to shut that down. It doesn't work for socialized medicine or government-controlled medicine. That doesn't work. That's not on the table as far as I'm concerned. That's not even close to one of the solutions. And we learned that good intentions doesn't work, because we today have more people uninsured in Kentucky than we did before we started the health reform, and the rates for everyone are much higher than they were and went up faster than the rest of the nation. So these easy solutions that people have proposed, some of them we just have to absolutely rule out, like single payer.
Okay, so you would be opposed to that. Do you have a positive solution?
Yeah, I think that in Kentucky, what we did is we destroyed the market. And we need to have a competitive, in a free market economy like America is, you've got to have a competitive market to make something work. I believe that having medical savings accounts where people can put money in a tax-free method into savings accounts, that is something that is in the right direction. Right now, people, depending upon whether you're an employee or small business or large business, different people are paying different amounts of taxes for their health care and their health insurance. That needs to be set up so you have medical savings accounts. There's another number of other free market type of initiatives that would work.
I want to try to get to two more issues. In the
Okay.
area of foreign policy, one of the things 106 is going to have to face is that the deadline in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians over the future of Jerusalem and really the ultimate solution there is going to come up during the 106th. What do you think about American foreign policy now, and what do you think about using American troops as peacekeeping troops in places like Bosnia, Kosovo, and who knows where else?
That's a pretty broad question.
Very broad question,
Okay.
and we don't have much time, so keep
Okay.
going.
I think that we have got to support Israel in its role as the democracy there, and Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and we've got to do that, and that's in the Middle East.
So that's closed even before the negotiations.
Well, if they agree on something out there, fine, let them agree on that. But we cannot come in from the outside and unilaterally push them one way or the other. The only way it's going to work, or anything's going to work there, if the two sides agree on it together without coercion from us. So we're going to support what comes out of that, but we cannot coerce either side into moving one way or the other. Around the rest of the world, we have got to restore the strength of our national defense. It's been hollowed out. We're not paying our troops enough. We're not maintaining the materials. We're not maintaining our equipment. We're not doing enough training. Not only could we not handle two regional conflicts in different areas of the world, there's some doubt that we could handle one regional conflict of the size of Desert Storm in the way we did last time.
On this military spending, one of the issues always is there's easy to spend lots of money on big flashy stuff. The order for 20 C-130s that Newt Gingrich pushed through because they're built in his district, but those may not be what the Pentagon wants. In fact, they didn't want those. How, as a Republican saying that you want to do responsible spending for military budget, do you balance out spending it on the expensive flashy stuff but still get what you want?
Well, what I'm interested in, I think where the area that we've been the shortest is the troops and the training. We have got to have troops that are trained to be the best soldiers in the world. That's how we won Desert Storm so fast. We also had to move a lot of material to Desert Storm. So that was key, being able to move material there, but it was the troops and the training and the professionalism of our military that enabled us to win so quickly.
Okay, spending money down on the personnel level.
Right.
One quick question, I only have about 30 seconds
Sure.
left. Another issue that 106 is going to face is the question of the renewal or whatever is going to be done with the special prosecutor law. Not just given Judge Starr, but given the whole history of that law, what will be your position on either renewing or changing that law?
Look, this was a Democrat law. They set it up while they had control of Congress.
So what are you going to do about it?
They've used to persecute presidents. I think that if it gets renewed, it needs to have some restrictions placed on it. Now, this isn't to say about anything in the past, anything about Ken Starr, but a future law needs to have more restrictions than the current law that the Democrats set up.
Do you think we need that law at all?
I have to go in, and there may be some parts that we need, but we existed for several hundred years without it.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll follow this race on election night. This is going to be a close one, I got a feeling.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Next week, I'll be joined by Lee Fisher and Bob Taft, the candidates for Ohio governor. Have a good week.